I watched in horror as Corinne Whitmore pointed her manicured finger at the construction crew surrounding my lifeguard tower. 300 people packed the beach below me, including dozens of children playing in the dangerous surf zones that only I could monitor from this height. She had done it. After months of threats and complaints about her precious ocean view, she had somehow managed to get official permits to tear down the tower that kept this entire community safe. The worst part was not the bureaucratic nightmare she had unleashed. It was not even the smug satisfaction on her face as she watched her crew wrap caution tape around my equipment. The worst part was what happened 90 seconds later when little Tommy Henderson started drowning in a rip current that I could no longer see from ground level. That was when I realized that Corinne Whitmore had just signed a death warrant for a 7-year-old boy, and she did not care one bit about it. My name is Marcus Rivera, and I have been the head lifeguard at Ocean View Estates for 8 years. This exclusive beachfront community sits along 3 miles of pristine white sand, where million-dollar homes tower over private beaches like glass and concrete castles. Every morning during peak season, I climb the 30-foot lifeguard tower that overlooks the main swimming area. From up there, I can see everything. Every child building sandcastles. Every teenager showing off on their surfboards. Every elderly couple taking their morning walk along the water line. The tower is not just my office. It is the guardian angel of this beach community. Painted bright red with reflective strips that catch the morning sun, it stands positioned at the perfect angle to cover the most dangerous swimming zones. Over the years, I have made over 200 rescues from that tower, saved kids from rip currents, helped lost swimmers find the shore, and spotted medical emergencies before they became tragedies. But there is one person who sees my tower differently. Corinne Whitmore lives in the massive glass mansion directly behind my station. She moved here 3 years ago with her lawyer husband and immediately started what she calls her campaign to beautify the community. What she really means is her campaign to control every single detail of beach life according to her personal preferences. Corinne serves as the HOA board president, a position she treats like a throne rather than a service role. She has shoulder-length blonde hair that never moves in the ocean breeze, designer sunglasses that cost more than most people make in a month, and a permanent expression of someone who just smelled something unpleasant. Every morning, she stands on her back deck with a clipboard, taking notes about things that annoy her. My tower annoys her most of all. According to Corinne, it blocks the perfect ocean view from her breakfast nook. She has filed 17 complaints in 2 years, demanding that I move the lifeguard station to a different location. The problem is that every other location would create dangerous blind spots in the swimming areas. I have tried explaining this to her dozens of times, using charts and safety data to show why the tower needs to stay exactly where it sits. Corinne does not care about safety data. She cares about her property values and her morning view of uninterrupted ocean horizon. Every week brings a new demand. Move the tower 50 feet north. Paint it a different color. Make it shorter. Install it on wheels so it can be moved during her dinner parties. Each suggestion is more ridiculous than the last, but Corinne delivers them with the authority of someone who expects immediate compliance. The tension between us has been building all summer like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Corinne has stopped speaking to me directly, instead sending official HOA letters with legal letterhead. She has started taking pictures of the tower from different angles, measuring distances, and making phone calls to city officials about permits and regulations. Today feels different though. The beach is packed with over 300 people enjoying the perfect weather. Families have claimed spots close to the water where their children can play safely under my watch. The surf is active but manageable, creating the ideal conditions for swimming and bodyboarding. Everyone seems relaxed and happy, trusting that I am keeping them safe from my elevated position. But Karen has been unusually quiet for the past week. No complaints, no demands, no angry letters in my mailbox. In my experience with difficult people, silence usually means they are planning something big, something that will change everything. The morning started like any other summer day at Ocean View Estates. I arrived at 6:30 to set up my equipment and check the surf conditions. The beach was already filling with early risers claiming the best spots for their families. Children ran toward the water with colorful beach toys while parents set up umbrellas and chairs in neat rows across the sand. By 9 o'clock, we had reached maximum capacity. I counted over 300 people spread across my coverage area, including at least 60 children under the age of 12. The conditions were perfect for swimming. Clear water, moderate waves, light offshore breeze keeping the surface smooth. From my tower, I could see every swimmer, every potential problem, every situation that might require my attention. That was when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery coming down the beach access road. 3 construction trucks pulled into the parking area behind my tower, followed by a white sedan that I recognized immediately. Corinne Whitmore stepped out of her car wearing a business suit instead of her usual beach attire. She carried a thick folder of documents and wore the expression of someone about to deliver very bad news. Behind her came 6 construction workers in hard hats and reflective vests. They unloaded equipment from their trucks with the efficiency of a military operation. Caution tape, orange cones, measuring tools, and what looked like demolition equipment. My blood started running cold as I realized what was happening. Corinne approached my tower with her folder held high like a weapon. She did not look up at me or acknowledge my presence. Instead, she began directing the construction crew to surround my station with caution tape and warning signs. The workers looked uncomfortable but followed her instructions without question. I climbed down from my tower to confront her directly. Corinne stood there with a smile that made my skin crawl. She opened her folder and pulled out an official-looking document with government letterhead and multiple signatures. "Emergency demolition permit," she announced loud enough for nearby beachgoers to hear. "Effective immediately. This structure violates multiple building codes and poses a safety hazard to the community." I stared at the document in disbelief. The permit looked legitimate, complete with official seals and signatures from city officials. But something felt wrong about the whole situation. The timing was too convenient, the process too quick, the paperwork too perfect. "Corinne, you cannot do this," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "There are 300 people on this beach right now. I need access to my equipment to keep them safe." She folded the document and slipped it back into her folder. "The permit is valid and binding. Any attempt to interfere with this demolition will result in criminal charges for obstruction." Parents started gathering around us, confused and concerned about what was happening to their safety net. Children pointed at the construction workers with curiosity, while their mothers held them closer. The entire atmosphere of the beach began shifting from relaxation to anxiety. Corinne directed her crew to begin dismantling my equipment. They unplugged my radio, removed my binoculars, and started taking apart the chair and umbrella that made it possible for me to monitor the beach for hours at a time. Each piece of safety equipment disappeared into their trucks like evidence being destroyed at a crime scene. I realized with growing horror that Corinne had planned this moment with military precision. She had somehow obtained official permits, hired a professional crew, and timed everything for maximum disruption during peak beach hours. Months of complaints and demands had been leading to this exact moment when she could finally remove the obstacle blocking her precious ocean view. The most sickening part was her expression of pure satisfaction as she watched my lifeguard station being systematically destroyed. She stood there like a conquering general, finally achieving the victory she had been planning for so long. In her mind, this was justice. In reality, she had just created a massive safety crisis that put hundreds of people at risk. From ground level, I could no longer see the outer swimming areas where the most dangerous currents operated. The angle was completely wrong, the sight lines blocked by crowds of people and beach equipment. Years of rescue experience told me that this was a disaster waiting to happen. Karen had won her view, but at what cost? 20 minutes after Karen's crew finished dismantling my tower, the first emergency began developing. From my ground-level position, I noticed unusual wave patterns in the outer swimming area that indicated dangerous rip currents forming near the sandbar. Normally, I would have spotted this immediately from my elevated position and warned swimmers to move closer to shore. Now I was running blind, trying to monitor 300 people from the worst possible vantage point. The beach had become a maze of umbrellas, chairs, and people that blocked my view of critical areas where children loved to play in the deeper water. Parents trusted that I was watching their kids, but I could barely see past the first row of beachgoers. The system that had kept this community safe for 8 years was completely broken. I grabbed my portable radio and tried to contact the beach patrol boat for backup coverage, but they were responding to an emergency 2 miles north and would not be available for at least 30 minutes. The Coast Guard station was even further away. For the first time in my career, I felt completely helpless to protect the people counting on me. That was when I heard the first scream. A woman near the water line was pointing frantically at something I could not see from my position. Other beachgoers started turning in the same direction, creating a growing circle of concern that spread like ripples across the sand. I pushed through the crowd, trying to reach the water line to get a better view of whatever was causing the panic. "Tommy," a woman screamed, "somebody help my son." I reached the front of the crowd and saw the crisis unfolding in the worst possible location. A 7-year-old boy named Tommy Henderson was caught in a rip current about 60 yards from shore, being pulled steadily away from the beach into deeper water. His small head bobbed in and out of view as waves crashed over him. His parents were knee-deep in the surf, screaming his name, but unable to reach him against the powerful current. This was exactly the type of emergency I would have prevented from my tower. I would have seen Tommy drifting into the danger zone and warned him back to shore before the current grabbed him. Instead, the situation had developed into a full-blown life-threatening crisis while I was arguing with construction workers about permits. I started running toward Karen, who was standing near her car supervising the loading of my equipment into the trucks. She was checking items off a list on her clipboard, completely oblivious to the emergency unfolding behind her. "Karen," I shouted, "there is a child drowning. I need access to my equipment right now." She looked up from her clipboard with annoyance, as if I was interrupting something important. The screaming from the beach had gotten louder, with more voices joining the panic as people realized what was happening. "The demolition permit is legally binding," she said without even glancing toward the water. "Any attempt to access this equipment will result in criminal charges." I could not believe what I was hearing. A child was literally drowning while she quoted legal paperwork at me. The absurdity of the situation made my head spin with rage and disbelief. "Karen, listen to me," I said, grabbing her by the shoulders. "Tommy Henderson is caught in a rip current. I can save him if you let me use my tower for just 5 minutes." She pulled away from me and reached into her purse for her phone. I am calling the police to report assault and obstruction of illegal demolition. The crowd behind us had grown larger and more agitated as Tommy continued drifting further from shore. His parents were crying and begging anyone who would listen to help their son. Other beachgoers were pointing at Corinne and shouting angrily about her refusal to allow emergency access to the lifeguard equipment. I realized in that moment that playing by the rules was going to get Tommy killed. Corinne had created a bureaucratic nightmare that prevented me from doing my job while a child's life hung in the balance. The traditional rescue methods were useless from ground level. The beach patrol boat was too far away. Swimming out to reach Tommy would take too long and might result in 2 drowning victims instead of 1. That was when my military training kicked in, and I remembered that sometimes you have to break the rules to save lives. Standing on that beach, watching Tommy Henderson disappear beneath the waves while Corinne Whitmore clutched her legal documents like sacred scriptures, I faced the most impossible decision of my lifeguarding career. Every second counted in a drowning situation, but the traditional rescue equipment was being held hostage by bureaucratic madness. My mind raced through the available options. Swimming rescue was nearly impossible from this angle and distance. The rip current that had Tommy would fight me every stroke of the way, and reaching him could take 5 or 6 minutes that he did not have. The beach patrol boat was handling another emergency miles away. The Coast Guard helicopter would take at least 20 minutes to arrive and deploy. Then I remembered something from my military days before I became a lifeguard. During my service as a Navy medic, I had trained with the coastal rescue units that used specialized aircraft for offshore medical evacuations. There was a paramedic jet stationed at the rescue base just 12 miles north of Ocean View Estates. I grabbed my emergency radio and switched to the rescue frequency. Coastal base, this is Rivera at Ocean View Estates. Emergency in progress. Child drowning, rip current, traditional rescue impossible. Request immediate paramedic jet deployment. The response came back within seconds. Rivera, this is Jake Morrison. What is your situation? Jake Morrison. I remembered him from joint training exercises 2 years ago. Former Air Force pilot who now flew emergency medical missions along the coast. If anyone could pull off what I was thinking, it would be Jake. Jake, I have a 7-year-old boy caught in a rip current 60 yards offshore. My lifeguard tower has been demolished, no visual coverage, beach patrol unavailable. I need rapid deployment to water entry point. There was a pause on the radio. Marcus, are you saying what I think you are saying? Corinne overheard my radio conversation and realized I was planning something that completely bypassed her authority. Her face turned red with rage as she understood that I was not going to respect her demolition permit or her legal threats. You will not use any unauthorized aircraft on this beach, she screamed. I will have you arrested for violations of airspace regulations and reckless endangerment. The crowd of beachgoers had turned completely hostile toward Corinne. Parents were shouting at her to move aside and let me do my job. Some people actually started physically blocking her construction crew to prevent them from interfering with the rescue effort. I keyed the radio again. Jake, I need water entry from aircraft. Coordinates are 34.7 north, 118.2 west. Child is drifting southwest in rip current. Copy that, Marcus. Aircraft departing now. Estimated arrival 4 minutes. Corinne went into complete meltdown mode. She started screaming about lawsuits and criminal charges and violations of federal aviation regulations. She threatened to have me fired, arrested, and sued into bankruptcy. But her words bounced off me like rain on a windshield. because all I could think about was Tommy Henderson getting weaker with each wave that crashed over his head. I looked out at the water and saw Tommy's parents trying desperately to reach their son. His father had made it about 30 yards before the current started pulling him back toward shore. His mother was screaming instructions that Tommy could not hear over the sound of the waves. Other beachgoers were calling 911, but emergency responders would face the same problems I was dealing with. The plan forming in my mind was absolutely insane. Water entry from a moving aircraft required perfect timing, expert knowledge of current conditions, and complete trust between pilot and rescue swimmer. One mistake could result in serious injury or death, but it might be the only way to reach Tommy before the rip current pulled him into the deep water shipping channels. I had done similar training exercises during my military service, but never in a real emergency with hundreds of people watching. The pressure was enormous, but Tommy's life depended on my willingness to take calculated risks that Karen's bureaucratic mind could never understand. I stripped down to my rescue gear and checked my equipment one final time. Flotation device, emergency whistle, first aid supplies. Everything I would need to stabilize Tommy and get him back to shore safely. The sound of jet engines was growing louder from the north. Jake was coming in fast and low, just like we had practiced during those training exercises years ago. I keyed the radio one more time. "Jake, I am ready for water entry. Target is 40 meters southwest of beach position, drifting with current." "Copy, Marcus. 60 seconds to deployment." This was it, the moment when everything would change. I was about to either save a life or end my career, and Karen Whitmore's legal threats were the least of my concerns. The sound of the paramedic jet engines cut through the beach chaos like thunder rolling across the water. Every person on the beach stopped what they were doing and looked up as Jake brought the aircraft in low over the surf, approaching from the north at perfect rescue altitude. The crowd went completely silent for a moment, processing the surreal sight of a bright red emergency aircraft approaching their exclusive beach community. Children pointed with wonder while their parents shielded their eyes from the sun to get a better view. Even Karen's construction crew stopped working and stared at the approaching jet. Karen's face transformed from smug satisfaction to pure horror as she realized I was actually going through with this insane plan. She started screaming about unauthorized aircraft and federal violations, but her voice was completely drowned out by the roar of jet engines and the excited chatter of the crowd. I could see Jake in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls as he lined up for the perfect approach. The aircraft came in at exactly the right angle and altitude, just like we had practiced during those training exercises. My military paratrooper training took over as muscle memory, and suddenly I felt completely calm and focused. 30 seconds to water entry, Jake's voice crackled over the radio. I climbed into position at the aircraft door, checking my rescue gear one final time. The water rushed up to meet us as Jake brought the jet down to deployment altitude. I could see Tommy's head bobbing in the waves about 20 feet away, exactly where the current predictions had indicated he would be. 10 seconds, Marcus. Good luck." The beach crowd held its collective breath as I prepared for water entry. Even the ocean seemed to pause, creating a moment of perfect stillness before the action exploded into motion. I executed the water entry exactly as trained, hitting the surface in a controlled dive that brought me up just yards from where Tommy was struggling against the current. The shock of cold water cleared my head completely, and all my rescue instincts kicked in at once. Tommy was exhausted and panicked, thrashing weakly against waves that were too big for his small body to handle. His lips were blue, and his eyes showed the glazed look of someone approaching the final stages of drowning. But he was conscious and responsive when I reached him. "Tommy," I called out as I approached, "I am Marcus, the lifeguard. You are going to be okay." I applied proper rescue techniques to secure him against my flotation device, making sure his airway stayed clear while I began swimming toward shore. The rip current fought us every stroke of the way, but my years of ocean rescue experience had taught me how to work with the water instead of against it. The crowd on the beach erupted in thunderous applause and cheers as they realized the rescue was succeeding. People were crying with relief, hugging each other, and shouting encouragement as I made steady progress toward shore with Tommy secured safely in my rescue hold. Karen stood frozen in complete disbelief, her mouth hanging open as her carefully orchestrated power play crumbled around her. The construction crew had abandoned their equipment entirely, watching the rescue unfold like a Hollywood movie scene. Her legal documents lay scattered on the sand, forgotten and meaningless in the face of actual heroism. Tommy's parents waded out to meet us, tears streaming down their faces as they realized their son was safe. His mother kept saying, "Thank you," over and over while his father helped pull us toward shore. Tommy was coughing up seawater but breathing normally, his color already returning to normal. The entire beach had transformed into a celebration. People were filming everything with their phones, capturing Karen's shocked expression and the dramatic rescue for posterity. The footage would later spread across social media like wildfire, but in that moment, all I cared about was getting Tommy safely to his parents. Jake circled overhead in the paramedic jet like a victory lap, the aircraft's bright red paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. The sound of the engines mixed with the cheers and applause from the crowd created a symphony of triumph that echoed off the ocean waves. In 90 seconds, everything had changed. Tommy was safe, breathing normally, and surrounded by his grateful family. The community had witnessed real heroism in action, and Karen Whitmore's authority had been completely undermined by her own callous indifference to human life. As I carried Tommy onto the beach, supported by his parents and surrounded by cheering neighbors, I realized that sometimes breaking the rules is the most right thing you can do. Karen's bureaucratic nightmare had been defeated by courage, quick thinking, and the willingness to put lives before paperwork. The lifeguard tower might have been dismantled, but the spirit of protecting this community was stronger than ever. The beach transformed into an impromptu celebration as Tommy Henderson recovered quickly under the attention of paramedics who had arrived by ambulance. His color returned to normal, his breathing stabilized, and within 20 minutes he was sitting up and asking for his parents. The relief on everyone's faces was overwhelming, but the real drama was just beginning. While medical professionals checked Tommy's vital signs, dozens of beachgoers surrounded Karen Whitmore with expressions ranging from disgust to outright anger. The woman who had commanded fear and respect through HOA authority now found herself completely isolated, facing the wrath of a community that had witnessed her prioritize property views over a child's life. "You almost killed that boy," shouted Margaret Chen, a mother of 3 who lived 2 streets over from Karen. "How can you live with yourself?" Karen tried to maintain her composure, but her voice shook as she attempted to defend her actions. "I was following proper legal procedures. The demolition permit was completely valid and binding." The crowd was not interested in her legal justifications. Parents who had been terrified for their children's safety just minutes earlier were now directing their fury at the person responsible for creating the crisis. Someone had started recording Karen's attempts to explain herself, and her words were being captured for posterity. What Karen did not realize yet was that the rescue footage had already begun spreading across social media platforms with lightning speed. The dramatic paramedic jet rescue, combined with her cold refusal to allow emergency access during a child's drowning, was going viral in real time. By evening, the hashtag #KarenBlocksRescue had accumulated over 50,000 views on various platforms. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines like HOA President Prevents Child Rescue for Ocean View and Lifeguard Uses Jet to Save Boy After Karen Blocks Tower. Suddenly, Ocean View Estates was famous for all the wrong reasons. Karen's attempts to control the narrative were pathetic and transparent. She called an emergency HOA board meeting for that evening, trying to spin the situation as a case of reckless endangerment by an out-of-control lifeguard. But the other board members had seen the rescue footage and were not buying her version of events. "Karen, we have a problem," said board treasurer Robert Kim during the meeting. "The entire community is calling for your resignation. Property values are going to tank if this story keeps spreading." The investigation into Karen's demolition permits revealed the true scope of her corruption. The documents were fake, created by a disgraced city official who had been taking bribes for fraudulent permits. The signatures were forged, the seals were counterfeit, and the entire operation had been an elaborate fraud designed to circumvent legitimate safety regulations. Local authorities began building a criminal case against Karen for fraud, bribery, and reckless endangerment. The FBI got involved when they discovered the fake permits involved federal waterfront regulations. What had started as a petty neighborhood dispute was now a serious criminal investigation. The community organizing against Karen happened with remarkable speed and unity. Property owners who had been afraid to challenge her authority for years suddenly found their voices. Petition drives gathered hundreds of signatures demanding her immediate removal from all HOA positions. Legal fund drives raised money to pursue civil lawsuits against her for endangering community safety. Karen's $1 million mansion became a symbol of misplaced priorities as protesters gathered outside with signs reading "Views over Lives" and "Fire Karen." Local news crews set up cameras across the street, interviewing neighbors about their experiences with HOA overreach and abuse of authority. The other HOA board members resigned rather than be associated with the scandal. Property management companies refused to work with Karen. Even her own husband, a successful attorney, began distancing himself from her actions as his law firm faced potential reputation damage. The legal consequences multiplied rapidly. Civil lawsuits from affected community members piled up on her doorstep. Parents filed complaints about endangering children. Beachgoers sued for emotional distress. Property owners claimed damage to community reputation and property values. The legal fees alone threatened to bankrupt her family. Karen tried hiring public relations firms to improve her image, but the rescue footage was too damaging to overcome. Every attempt to justify her actions only made her look worse. Her claims about following proper procedures rang hollow when compared to the reality of a child nearly drowning while she clutched fake permits. The woman who had once controlled every aspect of beach life through fear and intimidation was now completely powerless. Her authority had evaporated overnight, replaced by criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and social exile from the very community she had tried to rule. The most satisfying part was watching Karen's carefully constructed world of control and privilege collapse under the weight of her own narcissistic decisions. She had finally overplayed her hand, and the consequences were swift and devastating. Property owners who had suffered under her tyranny for years were finally free to speak out. Stories emerged about her petty vindictiveness, her abuse of HOA authority, and her complete lack of concern for community welfare. The full scope of her reign of terror was finally being exposed to the world. Justice was coming for Corinne Whitmore, and everyone in Ocean View Estates could feel it building like a hurricane on the horizon. Justice arrived with the weight of inevitability, as Corinne Whitmore faced the full consequences of her actions in both criminal and civil courts. The permit fraud and bribery charges resulted in 18 months of prison time, significant fines, and 3 years of probation with community service. The judge made it clear that endangering public safety for personal gain was a serious crime that would not be tolerated. The civil lawsuits were even more devastating to Corinne's finances. Settlements with affected community members, legal fees for multiple attorneys, and punitive damages drained her family's resources completely. The million-dollar mansion that had started this entire conflict was mortgaged to pay legal bills, then foreclosed when the payments became impossible to maintain. The emergency vote to remove Corinne from all HOA positions passed with 97% support, the most unified community action in Ocean View Estates history. Property owners lined up to vote against her, many sharing stories about years of harassment and abuse of authority that had finally come to an end. The community rallied together to install a permanent, elevated lifeguard tower that could not be removed without unanimous community consent. The new structure was even taller and more strategically positioned than the original, with enhanced equipment and multiple backup systems. Safety protocols were strengthened to ensure that no individual could ever again hold emergency services hostage for personal reasons. My actions during the rescue earned recognition from emergency services organizations across the state. The American Red Cross presented me with their highest honor for heroism under extreme circumstances. The State Lifeguard Association created a new training program based on the Paramedic jet rescue, teaching other lifeguards about unconventional response methods when traditional equipment is unavailable. Jake Morrison, the pilot who had executed the rescue with such precision, received commendations from both military and civilian aviation authorities. The rescue became a case study in emergency response coordination, demonstrating how quick thinking and professional cooperation could overcome bureaucratic obstacles to save lives. Corinne's forced departure from Ocean View Estates happened on a gray Tuesday morning when the moving trucks arrived to clear out her mansion. The community watched with satisfaction as boxes and furniture were loaded into vehicles, carrying away the belongings of the woman who had terrorized them for years. Some neighbors gathered on the beach to witness her final humiliation. She never apologized, never acknowledged the harm she had caused, never showed any remorse for nearly causing Tommy Henderson's death through her selfish obsession with ocean views. Even as criminal investigators led her away in handcuffs, she was still muttering about property rights and legal procedures. The new family that moved into Corinne's former mansion were grateful for the enhanced safety measures and strong community spirit they discovered at Ocean View Estates. They had heard about the rescue incident and were impressed by the way the community had come together to protect their children and hold their leadership accountable. Tommy Henderson recovered completely from his near-drowning experience and became something of a local celebrity. His parents enrolled him in swimming lessons and junior lifeguard programs, inspired by the dramatic rescue that had saved his life. He often visited the new lifeguard tower to talk with me about ocean safety and emergency procedures. The beach returned to its peaceful state, but now with an unshakable foundation of proper safety protocols and community solidarity. Property values actually increased as news spread about the strong community response to crisis and the enhanced safety measures that protected families. The Lifeguard Tower stood taller and stronger than ever, a permanent reminder that protecting lives would always triumph over protecting views. From my elevated position, I could see every swimmer, every child playing in the surf, every potential emergency before it became a crisis. The community had learned valuable lessons about the importance of holding authority figures accountable and standing up for what was right. Never again would a single person be allowed to endanger public safety for personal gain. The HOA board was restructured with term limits, transparency requirements, and community oversight that prevented future abuse of power. Karen Whitmore became a cautionary tale that spread far beyond Ocean View Estates. Her story was featured in documentaries about HOA abuse, community organizing, and the importance of emergency preparedness. She had achieved the fame she always craved, but as a villain rather than a hero. Years later, children playing on the beach would sometimes ask about the tall red tower that watched over them. I would tell them about the importance of safety, community cooperation, and having the courage to do what is right even when authority figures try to stop you. The tower remained a symbol of protection, justice, and the triumph of human decency over bureaucratic tyranny. Karen Whitmore was gone, but the lessons of her downfall would protect this community for generations to come.